Hello, long time no see. This isn't how I expected to come back to YouTube, but I feel like this topic was just way too important not to share. If you guys have been following me and have been awaiting for my return, hello, welcome back. And for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Kathy. I am an artist, graphic designer, and cultural critic. I've been posting content on social media for the past year, mainly short form videos on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts, and some long form videos discussing art direction, graphic design, pop culture, analyzing visual trends, and connecting them to the larger social, cultural, political conversations in the world. So last week I uploaded a short video critique summarizing what I'm going to be talking about in length in this video. It involves the censorship of an Asian American artist from a public exhibition focused on the Little Saigon community in Denver, Colorado. There's some tea. There's some mess involving a key Asian American organizer of the exhibition going against the censored Asian American artist, which I'm not surprised by. And I'm going to talk about the exhibition itself, which I did go and visit. I paid $15 a ticket for it, and how maybe it was for the better that the artist's work got taken down, because that exhibition was dog water. It was dog water. It was actually really bad. I'm sorry. Because I am posting this on the internet and people aren't really using their critical thinking skills anymore and are willing to misconstrue the words that I say, take them out of context, I'm going to give a few disclaimers. This isn't meant to be an expose or a hit piece. I am going to be talking about people in this situation, but my point isn't to drag them down or drag them through the mud or tarnish their reputation. That's not the point. This is meant to be a critical commentary on History Colorado's recent censorship controversy and the Big Dreams in Denver's Little Saigon exhibition from the perspective of a Colorado-based Vietnamese American artist and cultural critic, aka me. Based on my interpretation of the information and the press that is publicly available, I cannot guarantee or give a bipartisan or neutral view on this matter. Again, Colorado-based, Vietnamese American. I myself am an artist. I, have seen and heard about what goes on in these institutions, in the art world, in the creative world. It's a bit messy. But at the end of the day, I am just a 23-year-old girl with a BFA. Like, I am not a professional journalist. I am not a professional critic. This isn't meant for any sort of publication or outlet. This is literally just for me and my channel, and I want to share this information with you guys and acknowledge that this censorship situation is actually pretty concerning and says a lot about the current political environment we're in right now in the United States. So what happened? There's this painting that got censored. There's institutions going on. There's mess, there's tea, there's drama involved. What happened here? So the exhibition, Big Dreams in Denver's Little Saigon, was organized by History Colorado, the History Colorado Center. That's the space where the exhibition is. And this was organized in partnership with Colorado Asian Pacific United, CAPU. They held an open call for AANHPI, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander artists to propose artwork that, quote, explored the vibrant history, culture, and resilience of Little Saigon. Madalyn Drewno, the artist, as you can see here, was one of the 4 artists selected, and she proposed to create a triptych, a series of 3 paintings based on a community member, Ivy Ha's refugee story, and one of the subjects of the painting, Joey Ha, this is her as a kid. But not just her refugee story, but it's more inspired by her story and thinking about the ways in which the Vietnamese refugee story actually is a collective experience. Joey Ha, who is the daughter of Ivy Ha, is also the executive director of CAPU and was one of the key organizers of this exhibition. And as you can see here, this is one of the parts of the triptych is a portrait of Ivy Ha and Joey Ha. So I think you guys can already see where the mess is about to come into play. The proposal for this painting, as well as the other 2, were approved, and Drewno, finished all those works. As you can see here, it's very rendered, refined, it's colored. As you can see here, it is a very political artwork. It's a political tapestry. You see mentions of Sudan, Palestine, Congo, Get Ice Out of Lil Saigon, indigenous dancers, community members, and faces of certain leaders and activists. But the reason why this work ultimately got censored, or at least the reason that History Colorado gave, was because of these 3 sections right here. This, as you can see, is a more critical commentary. You see former governor, current senator John Hickenlooper with $signs over his eyes. These are all Colorado politicians, by the way. Governor Jared Polis with red handprints on his face, and a portrait of Michael Bennett within a sign that says Bennett funds genocide, in reference to the Israeli occupation of Gaza, of Palestine, and how the US ultimately profits from that. And when this work got censored, CapU initially, tried to advocate. They were like, hey, we're willing to display the work at a different venue. The fact that your work got pulled from the show, this has nothing to do with your talent, your artistic merit. And Drewno was also told that the subjects of my painting, Joey and Ivy Ha, loved the final work. They were excited for this to, be in the exhibition. And Drewno here, even says, CapU fought for my art to be displayed, and I don't blame them for its removal. Going back to this write-up from Southwest Contemporary, if you don't know what Southwest Contemporary is, they're an arts magazine focused on the Southwest region, so think California, Texas, going up to Colorado. Here's what they had to say about what History Colorado said. Officials with History Colorado, a state-run agency within the Department of Education, say that showing the painting in its galleries would violate campaign finance law because it could potentially impact how someone chooses to vote. Potentially impact. Interesting. The artwork unexpectedly included depictions of current candidates for office, and our longstanding practice is not to use public funds or resources as a platform for or against active political candidates, parties, and ballot issues, said Jason Hansen. This practice is viewpoint neutral and informed by the Fair Campaign Practices Act, the Hatch Act, the IRS ban on political campaigning for 501c3 organizations, personnel policies, and guidance from professional organizations such as the American Association of Museums. So interesting that they decided to cherry pick these 3 as a reason or to me an excuse to get rid of this artwork or take it down from view, when there's very obvious political imagery here that would make people feel uncomfortable, that would spark conversations. And this painting right here definitely represents the artist's political position as very left, which I guess could be seen as exclusive or targeting a different political ideology. And given that History Colorado is, again, a state-funded organization, they don't want to step on the toes of, Hickenlooper, Polis, Bennett. They don't want to step on the toes of any Colorado politicians that they, that are involved in their projects, that they get funding from. I remember seeing Hickenlooper's name next to the Sand Creek Massacre exhibition in one of the rooms, so his office definitely has been involved in some projects, but also it's giving preemptive damage control, going back to the language of it could potentially impact, it would violate, without their evidence of being a claim filed that this actually did violate the FCPA. It's they're trying to do damage control before any damage has been done, and they're trying to reduce as much risk as possible. They're reducing the risk so much so to the point that they're willing to silence the artist from expressing anything political. Keeping this painting away from view essentially prevents conversation and doesn't allow literally any room for dialogue about how the Vietnamese refugee experience, how the building of Denver's Little Saigon is ultimately connected to the global struggle for liberation, especially seeing what's happening now with ICE. And because that painting was part of a triptych, she decided to remove these 2 works as well, because it kind of wouldn't make sense given the context. And again, triptych, you need to see all 3 for it to be a triptych, so it wouldn't make sense for History Colorado to keep these 2 works up while the third part is censored. And this isn't the first time that a Colorado-based artist has been censored. Madalyn Drewno reached out to Native American artist Danielle Seawalker, who was essentially ousted from her residency in Vail. Seawalker was told that residents in Vail are very upset at you being a political artist. We can't have someone like you coming into our community with these messages. They canceled the residency from the potential politicizing of the public art program, again, potential, and that the program did not want to use public funds to support any position on a polarizing geopolitical issue. I mean, at least they're transparent about it, unlike what History Colorado is doing. Danielle Seawalker helped Drewno connect with the National Coalition Against Censorship. Drewno says her decision to make the exclusion of her artwork public was partly because she feels it conflicts with the, quote, grounding virtues that History Colorado outlines on its website as part of its anti-racism work, such as, quote, being in community and, quote, amplifying and centering voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And yeah, you can find the anti-racism grounding virtues in their About page, and it's a whole PDF of here's what we're doing to help combat racism, in our community, amplifying BIPOC voices, shared authority, basically paragraphs, saying like, oh, we're doing great work here. And yet what they've done is silence Drewno. And she is an Asian American artist. She is a BIPOC artist. So how are you amplifying and centering the voices of BIPOC individuals if you're silencing them? But yes, after getting connected to the NCAC through Seawalker, they worked together to essentially debut this artwork through their platform in this press release and through this letter to the History Colorado CEO. As these organizations explain in their letter, the center's interpretation of the FCPA that it applies to the display of art that expresses criticism of sitting officials is inconsistent with the FCPA, would stifle artistic freedom and violate the First Amendment. Following the completion of her loan agreements with HCC and the delivery of the paintings to the center, the artist was informed on October 16th, just days before the exhibition opening, that HCC would not show the final painting in the series. In defense of its decision, HCC representatives suggested that the painting's critical portrayal of current political figures would represent a violation of the Fair Campaign Practices Act. Correspondence delivered to Drewno suggests that her painting could influence voters, again, could influence, thereby putting HCC at legal risk. This is not a credible legal argument and would permit public institutions to broadly censor critical or political art in violation of the First Amendment. I agree, because this is a cop-out. Like, you're cherry-picking these three out of so many moments in this entire painting that people could have a problem with? Okay. For a gift or an action to be considered a contribution, it would need to be an item of value given directly or indirectly to a candidate for the purpose of promoting the candidate's nomination, retention, recall, or election. There is nowhere in this painting where Drewno is advocating for a certain candidate to be elected. These three are all critiques. She's not saying vote for this other candidate and not these three. She's saying, hey, these candidates are problematic. That's kind of it. The mere display of an artwork that is critical of public officials, regardless of whether or not they seek future election, cannot be understood as a campaign contribution favoring a specific political candidate. If FCPA precluded the display of art commenting on current political issues or criticizing public officials from being exhibited in a public museum, artistic freedom would be in shreds. The exhibition opened in late October, right? So that was just a few weeks before our state local elections. But even then, on our ballots, like at least on my ballot, it's not the midterms yet. We only had our state local elections. Governor Jared Polis wasn't running for re-election. Nowhere did I see Senator Hickenlooper or Senator Bennett on the ballot. So it kind of doesn't make sense timing wise to say that this violates the FCPA. But what's also interesting is that there has been little to no response from the politicians. Amid all the dialogue involving Drewno's work, three voices remain conspicuously absent. Thus far, neither Polis, Bennett, nor Hickenlooper have responded to my request for comment or provided a statement addressing the question of whether using their images in an artwork violates campaign finance laws. The New York Times did a write-up on this whole situation, A month later, this was published on December 10th. So this has become a national headline now, like for realsies. The author reached out to the politicians' offices again, and it's essentially a nothing burger. The politicians who are Democrats said they had no idea they were part of such a debate. Polis had not seen the painting and was not involved in its removal, according to his office. A spokeswoman from Bennett's office said that it was a dispute between the museum and the artist, but emphasized that the senator believes in an artist's first right amendment to self-expression. I guess that's something. Hickenlooper's office did not respond to a request for a comment. So yeah, again, no legal basis to this claim, but also no one has responded. So that was kind of all for nothing. But at the end of this write-up, the author reached out to Amy Werble, who is a professor of art history at FIT, who is currently developing a book on art and censorship. She's worked on Lust on Trial, Censorship and the Rise of American Obscenity. She said that the museum's legal argument was one she had never seen before. It's a real dangerous slippery slope to start asserting laws like that. To remove paintings that include political messaging is in direct opposition of constitutional value, said Werble. If we started to say that, no, that could be censored, then we really are just kneecapping the whole meaning of the First Amendment. So this is concerning. If you're not already convinced that we are currently living in an authoritarian fascist state, I don't know what will. Okay, this is the part where I get into the mess. And this is also the part where I'm gonna be a little mean. Going back to Joey Ha, who is one of the subjects of the painting and is also the executive director of CapU, she posted a talking head response on Instagram in an attempt to shift the conversation from censorship to that of consent, because the final artwork was different from the sketch that was approved by the Ha family. And number two, both Joey and Ivy became uncomfortable with the painting's use outside of the exhibition for a, quote, political campaign, referring to DrewNo and the NCAC's efforts to bring this painting to the spotlight and acknowledge what History Colorado did as censorship. So let's actually watch this response video.
The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Recently, an artist was commissioned to interpret my mom's refugee journey into paintings for an exhibition. One of the pieces with me and my mom in it included negative depictions of active politicians. Because of this, the venue said they couldn't display it. I was disappointed and wished there was a way forward. My mom, well, she doesn't care for politics and politicians. Wasn't sure why they were included in the first place because she doesn't talk about it in her story. She thought that decision made sense. A few weeks later, I saw this pop up on my feed. A whole coalition of civil rights orgs released a joint Instagram carousel and statement about censorship with the artwork with me and my mom's faces in it. They never talked to us. We never gave them consent. They presented it as if my mom and I were the faces of this campaign, that we were co-signing this action. We requested for the images to be removed, but they said that because my mom and I consented to the pieces being made in the first place, they could be used in whatever way. So I feel like when we talk about the master's tools, it's about how in our pursuit for what we identify as justice, we cannot treat others in ways that replicates the systems that we fight. The paths we choose to take to liberation are just as important as the goal in itself. Audre Lorde also says, without community, there is no liberation. I think about how the orgs and the artists were so quick to find importance in my mom's stories as a product, but not in us as people. They never considered being in community with us, never cared how their decisions impacted us. I've been so angry at the artists who I haven't heard from in days, at the civil rights orgs who were quicker to respond to press than they were to me and my mom, and myself, for not being a better steward for my mom's stories. I'll leave you with some questions. What does it mean when someone initially gives consent for an art piece, but then revokes it after seeing how it's being used? Does it even matter? What does it mean when civil rights orgs act on political expediency without care for those they aim to champion? Do their ends justify their means? I can't give you the answers to these questions. This story has grown so much beyond anyone's control with all this press, a lot of which flattens the narrative for moral outrage. It's easy to be angry at something that presents a delineated right and wrong. It's hard to actually dig deeper to find the messiness. I just hope to add nuance to this, add our voices to the mix, and try to do right by my mom, because I'm still her little girl, the one who at bedtime never asked for stories about princesses and dragons, but about my mom and her journey, telling her that they meant something.
I don't know if you could tell by my face, or I guess my lack of reaction, but I don't know if I was hiding it well. I am not a fan of this response, and I actually have a lot of issues with it. But before I go in and dissect this video and share why I have a problem with it, I do want to acknowledge that Joey and Ivy are valid in feeling the way that they feel. It sucks to be caught in the crossfire. It sucks to be wrapped up in the middle of this censorship, controversy, incident, situation, whatever you want to call it. And to see, both of your faces like plastered everywhere in the press, as a result of this painting publicly debuting under not very ideal circumstances can lead to fear about, how people will see you, how you're being represented, and if you're being represented and your story is being represented in a fair and acceptable way. I don't know if Joey, if you're watching this video or not, but this isn't rhetorically about you and your mom. This is about something much, much, much bigger than an individual story. Saying my mom, she doesn't really care about politics or politicians. I don't know why the three politicians were in the painting in the first place, emphasizes Ivy Ha's story as an individual experience instead of acknowledging Drewno's interpretation of her story to be connected with global politics and the global geopolitical struggle for global liberation. If you think about the Vietnamese refugee story and what was going on in the Vietnam War, it was a question of, is US imperialism the way to liberation? And for a lot of Vietnamese diaspora in the South who ended up moving to the US, a lot of them did believe in that, collaborating with the US was ultimately for the best, and they believed in the American hegemony. But Ho Chi Minh was like, no, I don't think so. We can achieve liberation on our own. We don't need foreign influence or the American hegemony to do that. But that is a different conversation. I'm more so talking about how the Vietnamese refugee story is intertwined with global politics. Saying we never gave them consent, I'm assuming she's referring to the NCAC here. This is the part where I'm a little confused because based on what I know, Joey and Ivy were expecting for this painting to debut at History Colorado. They were excited for the exhibition. They both loved the painting, going back to drewno's Instagram post. But because that painting got censored and now has to debut in a different way, I'm pretty sure Capu wanted this painting to debut at like a different venue, like maybe in a different gallery, a different space. And they probably didn't expect Drewno to go to the NCAC and debut this painting on such a public and national level, especially online, especially with, all the press, Southwest Contemporary, New York Times, that's a lot. So Joey and Ivy Ha were okay with this being at History Colorado, being publicly viewed at History Colorado, but not when it got censored and is now being shown on a different platform. They're both public spaces. Even if you go into History Colorado, there was going to be press there anyways. People were going to take pictures of it anyway. There was already photographers there. There was already press there covering the exhibition and what the exhibition looked like. So if the painting did not get censored, it would have been shown in photos like these anyways. Having this painting come out through the NCAC is still the same intent. It's still public, definitely more exclusive online than it is, in a venue or a gallery or an exhibition. But I think the real reason why Joey Ha expressed uncomfortability in that is because of how public this has gotten. And, with Colorado, we're not, with Denver, Colorado, we're not like LA, we're not New York, we're not Chicago, we have a vibrant, art scene here. We have a good creative scene here, but it definitely isn't as big or recognized on a national scale as, say, again, New York, LA, Chicago. So my question now is like, did you not want this to be public? Like, did you not want this painting to be shown at all? You know, no one in their right mind is gonna look at this painting on the NCAC website and be like, these two are part of a campaign. I don't, that's not, I don't think that's what's happening here. Going back to the conversation of consent, I'm curious what contractual obligations there were. I know in the press release or in the letter, they mentioned a loan agreement with History Colorado. Like, I'm curious what was in the agreement, because this is the graphic design side of me coming out. Usually for there to be creative professional work done within contracts, there are clauses in there that talk about, you know, usage rights, licensing, where can it be shared, you know, how much time has to pass before you're able to share it, is it in perpetuity? And usually as the artist, you know, there will be a clause in there saying that like the artist has all rights to the painting and can decide when, where, and how the work will be shown, because they're the artist, like they created the work, so therefore they have full usage rights of the work. I'm not sure if there was a clause in there regarding the subjects of the work, you know, for modeling, for usage rights for the subjects specifically. Going back to the Instagram post from DrewNo, she says in the caption, I also want to make it clear that I received full consent from the subjects of my paintings to use their likeness in my work, and that they fully understood that the painting would be publicly viewed. When consenting to have your portrait illustrated for public display, you will allow your likeness to be disseminated into the world. And then in one of the slides of this carousel, my project proposal was selected via CapU's open call process to tell the story of a community member. I based my paintings on this person's oral history, which is public and archived through the Little Saigon Memory Project. For those of you who don't know, the Little Saigon Memory Project is also a collaboration between History Colorado and CapU. They collected 36 deeply personal oral histories that are currently in SoundCloud. Yeah, the oral history collections is here in SoundCloud, and if I can find in there the oral history of Ivy Haas. So this is, you know, Ivy's story is publicly documented. So if this was a concern about representation or misrepresenting someone's story, you know, the accurate telling, you know, from the source is already public, it's already here. With full consent and participation, I also photographed the subjects of my painting and was given consent to illustrate their portraits. The subjects understood that the resulting work, which would contain their likeness, would be publicly displayed. So this is, again, emphasized over and over again, this is a public artwork. Also, reaching out to the NCAC and asking them to remove your likeness from the painting, like to block it out or blur out your faces from the painting, is kind of weird and ironic, because you're asking the National Coalition Against Censorship to censor the painting that has already been censored. So it's like a double censorship. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. And at the end, Joey Ha expresses anger that the artist hasn't reached out in days. Have you maybe considered that because you are the executive director of CapU and have close ties with History Colorado, that you with institutional power maybe are no longer a safe space for DrewNo to reach out to? Food for thought. Food for thought. The biggest issue I have of all with Joey's response is her misappropriation of Audre Lorde's quote, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." Haas starts her video with a quote, "For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house," and later on in the video saying, "Without community, there is no liberation." But that is not the full quote. Looking at the context of the full keynote, this is for an academic feminist studies conference. This is when Audre Lorde, you know, introduces and, you know, really brings up this idea of intersectionality and intersectional feminism. She wants to call in and give a shout out to the women who were not invited to this conference. She talks about those of us who stand outside the circle of the society's definition of acceptable women. You know, she wants to shout out the women who are poor, who are lesbians, who are Black, who are older. As women, we have been taught to either ignore our differences or to view them as causes for separation and suspicion rather than as forces for change. Without community, there is no liberation. only the most vulnerable and temporary armistice between an individual and her oppression. But community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist. What Audre Lorde means by without community there is no liberation is that community doesn't mean family members or family and friends, people who, you're amicable with. Community involves people who are different from you. Community involves people who, you might not be friends with, who you probably might not even like. It's your next door neighbor who's probably a little annoying, right? That is your community. Those of us who stand outside the circle of this society's definition of acceptable women, those of us who have been forged in the crucibles of difference, those of us who are poor, who are lesbians, who are Black, who are older, know that survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to stand alone, unpopular, and sometimes reviled, and how to make common cause with those other identified as outside the structures, in order to define and seek a world in which we can all flourish. Nowhere in Ha's video does she acknowledge these differences. Nowhere in the video does she acknowledge the differences between her and Drewno, between History Colorado and the NCAC. She doesn't even bring up CAPU or even the fact that she is the executive director of CAPU. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths, for the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. And this fact is only threatening to those women who still define the master's house as their only source of support. The irony is not lost on me here that Joey Ha is co-opting the language of Audre Lorde, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, when she, in a way, still defines the master's house as her only source of support. When she has institutional power, when she is the executive director of CAPU, when she has close relationship with History Colorado, and I believe is still trying to maintain that relationship. She doesn't want to step on the toes of History Colorado because they, have been pivotal in developing the projects that CAPU wants to do, right? Instead of calling DrewNo in or calling the NCAC in and saying, hey, let's talk, let's figure this out together, she ostracizes them. She says, you're not in community, even though community is about making community with people who are different from you. Community isn't about family and friends. Community is about having a connection with your next door neighbor who you probably don't like. Community is talking to people who, aren't just not like-minded, but people who might have different approaches to liberation, people who might not agree with your approach to liberation in a way that doesn't involve institutions, aka the master's house. So yeah, if you thought Joey Ha's response turned the situation into a mess, it gets a little messier. CAPU wrote a response titled On Co-Creation and Moving with Community. Interesting title, and I actually have it here as a PDF. If you're wondering how I got access to this, this was originally published through the CAPU newsletter. I'm not subscribed to their newsletter, but Joey did post a link to this statement on her story, and that was how I was able to get access to it. So yeah, this is all public, so I'm not pirating anything. This is public. At CAPU, we are guided by the collective heart of our people, our elders, culture, and knowledge bearers, and all those that have contributed to the rich tapestry of our lives. We are rooted in co-creation and thank the 20-plus community members who have helped shape this statement. Prior to opening, one of our artist pieces was declined for the exhibition. Note that they use the word declined, not removed or censored, declined. Here's what happened, and it's a series of bullet points. CAPU selected, commissioned, and paid for an artist proposal for 3 art pieces that aim to interpret the oral history of a Little Saigon elder's refugee journey, another use of the word elder here, and connections to our shared humanity and present-day reality. The final piece contains several differences, basically a repeat of what History Colorado said. Upon the final decision, CAPU supported the artist in her decision to pull her remaining 2 pieces from the exhibition. Though there have been questions about the reasons behind the denial of the work, we can only speak to our experiences. We take our relationship with our artist seriously and reaffirmed our commitment to co-creation by initiating various solutions with the artist, including opening a direct line of communication between the artist and the museum for further dialogue and repair. They censored her painting. What They didn't want that dialogue to begin with. Further discussion with CAPU team members for additional solution making. I don't know about that. Finding an alternate venue and pursuing programming that elevates the message of our art. I don't know if CAPU has truly followed up with drewno about that following Joey Ha's response. It's like going back to a bad ex. Like, oh no, like it'll be different this time. Like we're gonna heal, we're gonna talk it out. Like it won't be like before. I can't take this seriously. Dialogue stalled after images of the art were released on social media. The Elder, another repeat of the word elder, whose oral story was featured in the piece, was initially excited about the exhibition, but was not consulted on the changes to the original proposal, nor on how her likeness and refugee stories would be used outside of the exhibition. And then this goes into a paragraph kind of poetically going on about story ownership, stewardship. At CAPU, storytellers and artists come from backgrounds where their narratives have been erased and suppressed, and thus we take story ownership seriously. The artist retains the IP of her work and has conveyed that her creative expression is separate from the views of the subjects of the painting. For the Elder, with the inclusion of the politicians who are not mentioned in her oral history and the censorship claims, she believes her story is being used as a platform for someone else's opinions. She is fearful of the ramifications of being visible in this way and has asked for her personal depictions to be removed from the public sphere. Again, another repeat of the word elder. So that's like 4 times so far. We are reaffirmed in our values. We want to move forward with transparency, care, shared intention. We've learned a lot from this situation and will take steps to better protect our storytellers. Okay, so they've used the word elder 5 times in 2 pages. And even in the link to hear directly from the elder on the importance of sharing our stories. Ivy Ha, yeah. The elder is Ivy Ha. I think CAPU's choice of the word elder here in place of Ivy Ha's name does 2 things. One, it abstracts her role in the situation as someone of importance. You know, it in a way uplifts her role as an elder whose story was misrepresented, whose story needs to be protected and needs to be told with care. And in a way, it is a jab at drewno and the NCAC for misrepresenting her story. But on the other hand, it kind of dehumanizes Ivy Ha in that, you know, you're not even mentioning her by name. Like, who is she as a person? Like, who is she outside of being this revered elder that we all need to respect, right? Like, what does she have to say about this? I know that Southwest Contemporary has some, you know, a statement from her, but it was really through Joey Ha's translation. When I shared these stories, I just wanted them to be passed down to the next generation. I want people to see them and feel happy that the last generation went through so much and are trying to live a life of harmony. Everyone can have their opinions, but the ones about the politicians in the painting are not from my story. And yeah, again, valid to say, but the Vietnamese refugees story and the aftermath of it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. This isn't some hero's journey story with a happy ending. If we're still seeing ethnic cleansing and war and conflict and just overall, like, people not treating each other like human beings in this world. You know, what happened in Vietnam all those years ago are still happening today, just in different parts of the world and even here in the United States. This statement here is just a show of filial piety. By using this sort of language, it's uplifting oneself, saying like, oh, we're the better Asian because we respect our elders, right? Implying that drewno and the NCAC are, again, not in community. So that's what I have to say on this statement. Taking a look at this sketch here, this was the sketch that was originally approved by the subjects, History Colorado CAPU, before drewno moved on to create the final pieces that are pretty different from the original sketch, but this one is definitely where you can see the most amount of differences. And again, I get the frustration, I get where the anger is coming from. You know, the artwork was originally titled Future Generations, so this was, you know, the third part of the triptych. The concept for this artwork is to illustrate a portrait of Ivy and Joey Ha to represent their contributions and connections to the Little Saigon district, and to reflect on its current landscape and future possibilities. Symbols depicted: chrysanthemums, Lunar New Year hanging decorations. We'll collage into the background images, photos of past and present Little Saigon storefronts, including Mexican shops, items from shops and grocery stores such as fish sauce, dried squid snacks, Buddhas, and trinkets. These are all commodity items. And what's interesting is that looking at the exhibition, or, you know, the resulting exhibition at the end of all this, which I'm going to get into, you see a lot more of this commodity as representation than the more politically outspoken artwork that connects the Vietnamese American story to global politics. So I'm actually not surprised that drewno ended up going in a different direction. Because to me, this is just a family portrait. You know, it's very tame, it's palatable. If this was a family portrait that was like privately commissioned, like let's say Ivy and Joey Ha went to Madalyn drewno and were like, hey, we want you to make a painting like for our home. It'll be a portrait of us. Like we'll hang it in the living room, in the kitchen, in the bedroom. Like, sure, this is acceptable. But if this were to be in a public exhibition about the Little Saigon community in Denver, I would want there to be more substance. And as much as Capu says that this exhibition is a love letter to all those who laid the foundation, I will say that this exhibition wasn't a love letter because it didn't really focus all that much on the stories of Little Saigon, especially from the community members. I was honestly really disappointed. Like, I'm like genuinely bummed. All the negative things that I am going to say in the next, I don't even know, 30 minutes of this video aren't things that I want to say. Like, I'm genuinely kind of sad and bummed that this exhibition turned out to be the way that it is. And especially with the censorship controversy, maybe it was for the better that drewno pulled out, because this was ass. I'm sorry. This was not good. The first thing I will note about this exhibition right off the bat is that this is just a hallway. This hallway from one end to the other end, like, is all the space that there is. To me, it's kind of baffling that this exhibition was limited to such a narrow space, but I feel like Capu could have negotiated with History Colorado to advocate for, you know, at least like a small room, or, you know, one of the exhibition rooms that they did with the, Where's Denver's Chinatown exhibition. And yeah, it looks like they had, you know, full room, lots of space. I don't think this is enough space. Even if there was, you know, space for drewno's artwork to be included, I think it would have been severely compacted. Breathing room, visual room. But yeah, I went to visit this exhibition like a couple days before New Year's. I was with a couple friends of mine. I kid you not, the first thing that I heard when stepping out of that elevator and not knowing that we were already in like the hallway of the exhibition, right as we stepped out of the elevator, there was an Oriental trap beat playing in the background. One of the TVs was playing this montage of the Mid-Autumn Festival at the Far East Center from literally like a month before the exhibition's opening. This was like in September. Great start so far, guys. So yeah, that kind of gave me the ick, but I think was also foreshadowing what was to come. So the intention with this exhibition was to celebrate decades of resilience, creativity, and community, focusing on Southeast and East Asian refugees that basically transformed this little pocket of Denver on Federal Boulevard, Alameda, to create the Little Saigon Business District, which includes the Far East Center. And upon first impressions, like, I kind of thought that this was going to be more of an archival exhibition. And you do see a little bit of that here in the beginning. You see, you know, photos, a little map, a news clipping. They also acknowledge that the refugees that came from the conflict in Southeast Asia were not just Vietnamese. They were Vietnamese, Chinese, Cambodian, Thai, Hmong, Lao, and more. But typically when it comes to Little Saigon, like, I immediately think of Vietnam. I mean, Saigon, it's in the name. We built Denver's Little Saigon neighborhood in the 1970s and 80s after fleeing war and poverty in Southeast Asia. No specific mention of the Vietnam War. Seeking a better life, we arrived in Denver ready to face new challenges. Social and economic obstacles were everywhere, but we relied on each other to establish homes, start businesses, and build supportive networks in an unfamiliar country. In the decades following our arrival, we shaped Little Saigon into a flourishing community. Our grocery stores and markets offer produce that can't easily be found anywhere else in the area, while our restaurants serve comforting tastes of home. From legal support and healthcare to trend-setting boutiques and karaoke-filled nights, Little Saigon is where many of us find everything we need. As we look ahead, we take inspiration from our own experiences and from those who built this neighborhood before us. Their stories help guide us as we shape what comes next. I am a little confused about the use of we here and the use of we throughout, all the copy in this entire exhibition. Is the we referring to the organizers and the contributors to this exhibition? Does the we refer to community members in the Little Saigon area? Does it refer to visitors and customers as well? Does it refer to the general, broad Vietnamese American, Asian American community? I'm a little confused about what we is referring to here and if I'm included in that. Because I am Vietnamese American, I grew up going to Denver's Little Saigon, I grew up going to the Far East Center, but I'm not from that area. I don't live in Westwood. I grew up in Aurora, and definitely as the years went by and more Asian businesses started establishing themselves in Aurora, my family and I didn't really have a need to go, on a 30-minute drive to the Far East Center or Federal Boulevard as we used to when I was in elementary school. So even though I am Vietnamese American, I feel quite distanced from Denver's Little Saigon. I'd say the biggest critique that I have of this exhibition is that it presents Denver's Little Saigon as a sort of Orientalist fantasy for the non-Asian, most likely white viewer that is walking through this at History Colorado. This is a quote from Anne Chang's Ornamentalism, which is an entirely different, sort of theory, but she defines Orientalism, 19th century Orientalism as per Edward Said, that opulence and sensuality are the signature components of Asiatic character, that Asia is always ancient, excessive, feminine, available, and decadent, that material consumption promises cultural possession, that there is no room in the Orientalist imagination for national, ethnic, or historical specificities. Even though here they do mention hey, our roots are from Southeast Asia, we span many ethnicities, from different regions, Vietnamese, Chinese, etc. To me, the decals and the decorations supplementing the materials of this exhibition, to me, read as Chinese, but not Chinese in a specific way. It's Chinese in a very general, almost stereotypical way. And while I do want to acknowledge that there is a lot of overlap between Vietnamese and Chinese culture, Vietnam is technically part of the Sinosphere because Vietnam used to be a part of the Chinese Empire, and because of that, Vietnam, even though it has its own national local identity that is separate, has taken a lot of influence from China. But this also, to me, the dragon, the lanterns, this pattern right here, the flowers that you can barely see that I cut off. It's very Oriental. It's very stereotypical. It doesn't read to me as Southeast Asian. It just reads to me as Chinese, but in a very general, almost stereotypical way. And I also have to point out the photos here. Why are these photos trimmed with paint streaks? And I went to go see the exhibition. I saw these photos up close, and I was really taken aback by this. Why couldn't these photos have been framed, in a matching color? Because if you look here, they are separating the framing of the photos into different sections just based on the color. So I get that. But to me, this reads as a very tacky design choice to come off as rustic, urban, DIY. It looks like a mistake. I'm being really harsh right now. I'm sorry. So for me, I feel like I'm already seeing the lack of care that went into this. One of the things in this exhibition that I saw that honestly took me out was whatever this is. A white rabbit candy, a dried shredded squid snack, and kalbi shrimp chips, and a mooncake paddle. Why are these encased in glass? I don't think they're that valuable. Typically in a museum setting, an exhibition setting, even in a gallery, you encase items in glass when they're not supposed to be touched, if they're delicate, again, for archival purposes. I'm not sure what the point is of presenting these three snacks as important cultural artifacts, if you can easily get these three at literally any Asian grocery store. Like, it doesn't have to be anywhere in like Little Saigon, in Federal Boulevard. You don't have to go to like the Far East Center to get these three snacks specifically. Like, you could go to freaking Great Wall, which is like on the same street on Federal Boulevard, just a little ways off, and get these for like $10 max. Like, you don't have to be in the Little Saigon area. You don't even have to be in Denver. Like, if you're in Aurora, go to H Mart. They have these. You can get them for $10 max. Like, these are consumable items. They're snacks. They're commodity products that are generally easily accessible. So, I mean, I get it. You know, if you're trying to show the person who is not familiar with Asian snacks or Asian food at all to know what the packaging looks like, I understand. But to me, I can't take this seriously. I'm sorry. I don't think you need to be doing all that, is what I'm saying. Okay, this next thing took my friend out, my friend who went with me to see this exhibition, because she pointed at this exact red qipao and she was like, I have this exact dress, this exact costume from DiSmAnTLe Gifts, and I make my dog wear it for shits and giggles. Like, it's so, you're frying me, is to quote her. She literally said, you're frying me, like multiple times while looking at this exhibition. And it's interesting because there's no explicit mention of DiSmAnTLe anywhere, even with the freaking Labubu. Like, this took me out again, encased in glass with a trading card, stationery, a Paris by Night VHS tape. The copy next to it had a picture of Goku on the bottom, which I get it, pop culture, but like Japanese, but sure, Asian. But yeah, these stationery items are from DiSmAnTLe. Like, I'm 95% sure that they are sourced from DiSmAnTLe. The DiSmAnTLe gift shop has played a very, like, pivotal role in bringing the Labubu craze to Colorado, because here in Colorado, we don't have a Pop Mart. So, you know, other stores, shops, local family-owned shops kind of had to fill in the gap, and DiSmAnTLe was definitely one of them. I remember summer of last year, they were, like, going viral on TikTok, where all the like white influencers were like, come with me to this cute little gift shop to get a Labubu. This video got 33,000 likes, 500 comments, 7,000 saved. Yeah, that's a lot of likes. DiSmAnTLe Gifts has their own TikTok account. They have 10,000 followers, which is, you know, nothing to scoff at, especially for a local gift shop. So yeah, where's the mention of DiSmAnTLe in here? You know, today Little Saigon is one of the only places where you can get an authentic Labubu if you're willing to wait in line. Little Saigon this, Little Saigon that. Why aren't you being specific and mentioning DiSmAnTLe? Like, not everything is a gift shop here. You can't get a Labubu at a grocery store. This right here was kind of the nail on the coffin when it came to me realizing that this exhibition probably wasn't worth my 15 bucks into History Colorado. Look in the mirror to see what you would look like with these styles. Tag us in your selfie. And it's the, quote, dreaded bowl cut, and 90s Asian bleached hair. I can't with this. No. The legacy of Denver's Little Saigon is getting these fuck-ass haircuts. That's what people were doing. Let's read this copy here. Fashion in Little Saigon allowed younger generations to assert a new Asian American identity. They combined trends from Asia with American styles, often looking to Black and Latino culture as examples of how to create their own fashion without fully assimilating. Assimilating to what, exactly? Kids who grew up enduring the dreaded bowl haircut grew into their own autonomy and made their own fashion mistakes. I don't know about that sentence. That's kind of a backhanded compliment. From connecting with our roots through traditional clothing like qipaos and aoyais, to discovering the freshest looks at neighborhood hair and nail salons, Little Saigon offered a space to express ourselves. The Asian bleached hair of the 90s, the drawn-on eyebrows, and baggy streetwear with chain wallets reflected how we created our own style while integrating into American culture. I didn't see examples of that anywhere. I mean, aside from the bleached hair and the bowl cut and this, I don't know if that's really true. Again, I feel very distanced from the Far East Center and the Little Saigon community because it was a ways away from where I was growing up. I don't know if people around me, or at least like my family friends, really sought out to go to Little Saigon for haircuts and for fashion trends. I mean, looking at these photos, we had a photo of a hair salon here, Modern Boutique, 1984, the Ao Yai and the Chi Pao, as I mentioned before. This thing and this illustration, that was generally it for the fashion section. So there isn't really any examples of what the copy is describing here in this last sentence. When I was like standing in front of these mirrors, I noticed that the mirrors were a little lower than where I was. And mind you, I'm short. I'm like 4'11". So to see these mirrors slightly lower than where I was signals to me that this was an interactive activity for middle schoolers, elementary schoolers, which I get that it's fun for the kids, but it's also very reliant on stereotypes. Like, I don't know if this is good representation, because if I were a mom and I had a kid and, I wanted to bring my family to this exhibition, me being a Vietnamese American woman, me being an Asian woman, I would feel uncomfortable at the thought of having my kid look at themselves in the mirror and see them with this quote dreaded bowl cut and the bleached hair and think it was like funny. Because in a way, it's, I guess, self-deprecating. It's poking fun at ourselves, but I don't know. It's very stereotypical. Again, it's relying on superficial things to poke at for quote like representation or whatever. Like this is representation, guys. Like I don't know, guys. This feels weird. What I notice about Jane Lee's paintings is that they're very simplistic, but almost voyeuristic as well. Like, to me, these come off as simply more painterly versions of photos that you can find on Google Maps or Yelp. Again, I'm being very harsh, but like, this is what I'm seeing and this is how I'm interpreting it. Because these are, storefronts, businesses that people pass by in their cars like all the freaking time. So to see that repeated again, but in a more painterly form, is redundant. Jane, if you're watching this, I'm really sorry, but like, girl, I wanted something more, girl. I want something more, girl. The only positive thing I will mention about this exhibition is the illustrations of Quỳnh Như Thi Nguyen. It depicts a woman in an ao yai, but the blue also, cascades down into waves. And here you see a ship of people. This is titled The Journey to the Promised Land. And what's different is that it's not about food, it's not about consumables, it's not about commodity items. It is a more genuine depiction of the refugee experience. And there's a level of detail and care put into this illustration that I don't see anywhere else in the exhibition. The use of the gold leaf, the expressions, I think the treatment of the expressions, the line work, the skin, even the delicacy of the coloring. This is a yellow ao yai with yellow petals, yellow flowers, but there's enough contrast and value to delineate between, each petal and this very intricate pattern in the dress. And the flecks of gold leaf here and in this headdress, like, it adds a very ethereal, refined quality to the work. To me, it's almost reminiscent of Yoshitaka Amano, if you're familiar with his work. I literally have one of his illustrations like right here, like hanging by me. Like that's how much I am a fan of him. But again, it is in stark contrast to, just the rest of the treatment of the exhibition that to me is very commodified. So yeah, in the beginning, you see an attempt at archiving, telling the stories of refugees who moved here to try and create a community of their own. Traditional games at Cambodian New Year, only mention of Cambodia, nice. But I'm seeing a mixture of a lot of like personal photos with more current photos that kind of makes me confused as to what the timeline is. And then you mix in, these bags of snacks and illustrations. This is another one of Jane Lee's paintings, and underneath it are canisters of smelling salts. I believe. And like you can go up to one of the cans, grab it, and smell jasmine tea, sriracha, star anise, Eagle brand medicated oil, which is taking me out. Like, I spent $15 to smell something that I already have in my own bag. That's crazy. And again, the treatment of these photos, the paint streaks are taking me out. And again, there's a lot of copy here in place of what could be more pictures and visual representations that would get the point across a bit more meaningfully and effectively. And I'm honestly pretty sad that these 36 oral histories weren't really anywhere else in the exhibition. They were limited to this iPad underneath a comic strip. I think it's a comic strip from Joey Ha, of course. Like, yeah, I get that it's accessible and you can access it outside of the museum, but like, none of that is represented anywhere. CapU could have asked for the participants to submit photos or submit any memorabilia or any like personal artwork so that they can contribute visually to the exhibition and not just orally. And again, 36 oral histories, that's not a number to scoff at. Like, 36, you could have had a 6x6 grid of photographs on the wall somewhere to represent the vastness and the diversity of these stories. We could have had quotes like put up on the wall as decals. Okay, this one right here took my other friend out, not the one who pointed at the cheap how, but my other friend who came with me. He pointed to the bowl of pho in the center and, this illustration of the aromas, floating through the air and traveling far and wide, across the cityscape and the mountains, which I believe represent Colorado. The monkey up here is chilling, eating. There's a monkey down here with a Walkman. Is that a Walkman? I think that's a Walkman. And a little rat here with a cassette. There's a table going across the three parts with various, popular like elements of Vietnamese cuisine. You see the candles, fish sauce, banh mi, yeah, crab and shrimp, which may represent, seafood. Could also refer to Viet Cajun food in Louisiana, which, I don't know, the seafood, we're living in Colorado. We don't live near the ocean. Like, our seafood is not good. Got an array of vegetables here, fruits, vegetables, another candle, Vietnamese coffee, cassette tapes, or VHS tapes, Café du Monde, what is, also from Louisiana. At the very center here, you see, I believe, like a mom and her daughter, star anise, herbs. This is a very fun, decorative painting. I do think compositionally, it's very interesting to see the framing. It's a very dynamic composition. I'll give the artist that. But thinking about the content in here and the subject matter, it is a bit, I keep on saying this word, stereotypical, because these are very easily recognizable, ingredients, dishes, elements of Vietnamese cuisine. I mean, the bowl of pho being as big as it is, like, obviously that's a very big indicator, like, hey, Viet food, Vietnamese culture, Vietnam, like, duh. My friend described this bowl of pho as mysticizing. I think the way that it's presented with its, steaming aroma, floating across different landscapes, and even with this wide array, it gives off this messaging that, like, food is the ultimate unifier, right? Food is what connects us. It connects us beyond borders. And that is quite honestly a very tired narrative that I keep seeing pop up. There's this blog article here from Anis to Zatar. Trump eats tacos, why eating and cooking diverse food won't make you a better person. And a recipe for this really cool dessert. The ability to cook diverse food, to eat food from different places and cultures, is too often described as an enlightenment project, as a way to becoming something else. It's seen as a way to become more attuned to diverse ways of being, to even become less racist, more understanding. The famed travel and food blogger Anthony Bourdain, remembered for the way he engaged diverse food cultures and told stories through food, summed up his philosophy as encouraging people to move, to walk in another's shoes, to at least eat their food as a way to becoming a better person. And I feel like this at least eat their food part is kind of the only takeaway that people got from the Bourdain of it all. This idea that food is what unites us, that you can connect to someone through food, it's the lowest hanging fruit because it requires the least amount of work from people. All you have to do is just sit there at a table and eat. Like, everybody needs to eat. That is a basic human need. And again, it's pleasurable, you know. Food from other cultures tend to taste differently, but they can also be seasoned in different ways. So it's like an adventure for your taste buds. But to say that, oh, by eating this food, you can become a better person is really, I'm not seeing the connection from point A to point B here. Because one, you're just eating. That's like not a lot of effort. To no longer being a racist, which actually does require a lot of work on one's part. I'm not seeing the connection here. So there's this Vice article, Does Food Actually Unite Us? That was written as a review / critique of Padma Lakshmi's Taste the Nation. As it's said over and over again, food unites us becomes a self-congratulatory aphorism that doesn't prompt white Americans to do anything particularly challenging. There's a performative emptiness in the idea as we think of who is being united with whom and why these divisions exist in the first place. These stories provide a platform for the immigrant experience, but the effects of the white American gaze are clear, as food becomes a means for validating lives that look unfamiliar. This article actually links to another article by Jenny Chang, which is also a review of Taste the Nation. She mentions this one scene in the first episode where Lakshmi goes to El Paso and she meets up with the Syrian American owner of a restaurant who claims to love Mexicans, among them his staff, but vocally supports Trump. He literally says, he's full of shit, but I like him. I watched this one scene on YouTube and Lakshmi is definitely, you know, very buddy-buddy with this guy. She's very amicable, having a lot of conversation with him. So she doesn't really go against his politics or push on that. She doesn't question it. She's more like, oh, this guy owns a restaurant that has a lot of Mexican staff, but he also loves Trump. And that's like kind of contradictory, but I guess that's just part of being human, right? Here, food operates not quite as a unifier, but as the crux of a business model dependent on the dynamic between the United States and Mexico. And while Padma Lakshmi's show Taste the Nation, as well as Dave Chang's Ugly Delicious, it's an attempt at going into the politics of food, thinking about migration, trade routes, ingredients, where certain ingredients are native to, and how migration of people has also impacted the migration of food and of ingredients, things like that. I do notice that with Ugly Delicious and Taste the Nation, it falls back on this idea of like, oh, food is what unites us and brings us closer together. At its heart, the call to action of the food unites us rhetoric is based on the exchange of goods as people consume foods outside their culture. That exchange benefits existing and unequal systems, as immigrants are valued through the ways their labor or cultural products enrich the lives of others. But our personal affinities for certain foods are not meaningful indicators that we revere or respect the people and the cultures that created them. As food writer Alicia Kennedy has commented, I should be able to fucking hate burritos, I do not, and still recognize everyone's humanity, every person's intrinsic worth and dignity. And I wholeheartedly agree. This constant theme of commodification that I see pop up in this exhibition reminded me of this essay from Jenny Chang, rise and fall of the boba generation that she wrote for Eater magazine. If you are watching this video and you haven't read this essay, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you read this because I think it digs into some very important topics that even though this was published back in 2019, people don't bring up, like even to this day, like in the year 2026, like nobody is really mentioning boba liberalism and how conflating food with identity comes with its own set of problems. The first part of this essay talks about bubble tea, boba, and how it has grown in popularity as a drink that was originally from Taiwan to now being like one of the most popular dessert drinks in the United States. Thinking about the history of Chinese food in America, it's worth asking, who gets to feel, quote, unapologetically Asian? When it comes to bubble tea's outsized presence among the iconography of Asian American pop culture and identity, the answer is, as is so often the case when talking about Asian American issues, colored by an East Asian American and Chinese American in particular hegemony, that can erase or overshadow the experiences of other Asian Americans. The author goes into this idea of like the lack of visibility and how boba in a way has become a form of empowerment, but also, a passing of the baton from American hegemony to East Asian hegemony. In a lot of ways, finding empowerment through the popularity and general public acceptance of what was originally like a very Asian drink. I can't necessarily fault Asian Americana for doing so. For Asian American cultural politics, the apparent conflation of food and ethnicity holds particular significance. For many consumers in mainstream America, food is often the only point of connection with racialized subjects, such as Asian Americans. And you definitely see this exoticism and exaggeration of the ethnicness and the exoticness of this bowl of pho in this artwork. Food is the one thing right now, at least in Western culture, that if you're really Asian or really authentic, it's praised. Food is something where we can truly be ourselves, and it's like you have to come into our world. Towards the end of this article, you get into the politics. The author cites bell hooks. Within commodity culture, ethnicity becomes a spice, seasoning that can liven up the dull dish that is mainstream white culture. The commodification of difference, according to Hooks, threatens to flatten and cannibalize the difference while stripping it all of historical context and political meaning. As signs, their power to ignite critical consciousness is diffused when they are commodified. Communities of resistance are replaced by communities of consumption. The author then goes into the definition of boba liberalism, which is essentially Asian American neoliberal politics and how honestly very shallow of a political identity it is. While bubble tea itself is neither inherently political nor bad per se, some Asian Americans are critical of the dominant strain of Asian American politics called boba liberalism. Boba liberalism, as defined by Twitter user @diasporaisred, is the substanceless trend-chasing spectacle that is mainstream Asian American liberalism, derided as shallow, consumerist capitalist, and robbed of meaning. Redman says in a podcast, it's a sweet, popular thing, it's not very offensive, but it's also not that good for you from a health point of view. It's just empty calories. It's all sugar, no substance. It's wanting to reconnect with your roots by drinking bubble tea, getting added to subtle Asian traits, and organizing funders for your Asian Student Association, but never studying your history and feeling solidarity with your homeland against imperialism, which is exactly what madalyn drewno was trying to do with the painting that ultimately got censored. She studied the history and made connections and was like, wait a minute, this isn't just a Vietnamese struggle. This isn't just an Asian struggle. This is a global struggle. Yeah, seeing this repetition of food and this idea of service. You see these two men like hard at work, a lady pushing a dim sum cart, these snacks, these smellingtons. These sort of reinforce the narrative of eating the other, that these places are open as a playground for non-Asian visitors to, see for the first time and smell and taste and essentially have an encounter with the other without going into the deeper questions or the deeper narratives or even questioning the political circumstances that led refugees to create the Little Saigon community out of survival. And yeah, it's empowering. It's an important story to share, but I think it also reinforces this narrative that immigrants are only valuable when they're hardworking, saying that they're workers before they are people. And that in and of itself kind of promotes a dangerous ideology that immigrants who go to school, who may be disabled, who are elderly, who maybe aren't able to work, especially in service jobs in any capacity or in any physically taxing jobs, that they're not of any value, that they're not worth anything as human beings, and that is dangerous. Hi guys, editing Kathy here. Thinking about bell hooks is eating the other, I want to share a short video I did about the quote being Chinese trend that conveys the point that I want to make about the limits of commodification as representation. Saying I'm Chinese now is actually a form of eating the other. I thought the whole I'm at a Chinese time in my life trend was cute for a moment, but then it's devolved into I'm Chinese now because I drink hot water. And I'm like, guys, why are we cutting out so many words? I'm gonna read you guys this quote from the Bell Hooks essay that encapsulates everything that I want to say about this topic and then break it down. Cultural appropriation of the other assuages feelings of deprivation and lack that assault the psyches of radical white youth who choose to be disloyal to Western civilization. Concurrently, marginalized groups deemed other, who have been ignored, rendered invisible, can be seduced by the emphasis on otherness, by its commodification, because it offers the promise of recognition and reconciliation. At first, it's empowering, right? It's empowering for Asians and Asian Americans, Asian diaspora, to see that the mainstream white American population loves their food, their fashion, cultural practices, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the mainstream white audience sees Asians or Chinese people as equals, as human beings. It reinforces the perpetual foreigner stereotype. With the downfall of the American hegemony and the rise of China as a global superpower, white Americans want to jump ship. They want to get a little bit of that spice. It leads to the exaggeration of the other, creating an Orientalist fantasy for the white gaze while making the mainstream white audience feel less racist because they're being open to new and diverse experiences. It's giving very surface level Anthony Bourdain, this philosophy that by walking in another's shoes or at least eating their food, you can be a better person. Now people are conflating eating that culture's food with being that ethnic identity, which is weird. Packaging Asian culture through food and commodity items that are palatable, inoffensive, trendy, flattens centuries, if not millennia, of history and culture into a little tasty snack to be consumed, digested, and then shitted out. This interaction with the other through food and cultural exchange goes unquestioned because it's pleasurable, it's positive, it's healthy. Why take the fun out of something that feels so good? Because drinking hot water and saying you're Chinese now doesn't change anything. It doesn't challenge white supremacy. It doesn't change the material conditions for Asians and Asians across the diaspora. It's just cultural cosplay disguised as appreciation. So going back to the Denver's Little Saigon exhibition, I will say that it has very assimilationist messaging that if you pull yourself up by the bootstraps and pursue the American dream to open up these businesses, that you can succeed and make money. There's this narrative that immigrants and refugees benefit from moving to America to escape conflict, which, you know, that's a fact, that's true. But there's also a lack of acknowledgement on how American imperialism has destabilized the countries that these immigrants and refugees come from, leaving them no choice but to come to the States or really anywhere in the West for a better life. In a way, it distances the more mainstream American, white American audiences from the politics, geopolitics at play here. And the capital gain that Asian Americans in particular do achieve come at the expense of stereotypes, exoticism, Orientalism, profiting off the mainstream audience that is willing to spend money to have an encounter with the other that is Little Saigon. But then again, the mainstream acceptance of Asian foods and commodity items doesn't automatically mean that Asians in the West are granted humanity. 5-6 years ago, it wasn't cool to be Chinese or East Asian, Southeast Asian for that matter. There was a rise in anti-Asian hate attacks. There was a rise in xenophobia. It wasn't cool to be Asian at all for that matter. Like, even though I am not Chinese, I'm Vietnamese and I look very East Asian. So anyone who looked like me, looked like this, could easily be targeted. And you also have to think about the Atlanta spa shooting. If the treatment of Asians in the West is so turbulent and dependent on geopolitics, whether the world is in a time of peace or a time of conflict, whether you come from a country that is an ally or an enemy of the US, then assimilating to the American dream and being the model minority are ultimately useless endeavors. So that's what I have to say. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed me yapping, getting into some tea, some mess, but also giving you guys a critique of this exhibition. We will be back to regularly scheduled programming once this video is out. By February, I will be free. I will be free from whatever the heck this was. I was honestly scared to make this video, and I have been agonizing over how to structure this video, what to say, how to say it without sounding like a complete asshole. And I hope you guys are understanding and that I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm not trying to be a hater. This is me being a critic, and I felt like I needed to say something about this at length just to get into the weeds and the nuance and dig into why this whole situation bothered me so much from, again, a larger social, cultural, political perspective. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at kalinaxkathy or kalina_Kathy. You can also find me on Arena, Substack, literally anywhere that has this username. And to quote D'Angelo Wallace, I hope you never have to think about this dog water exhibition and dog water censorship controversy ever again, because I feel like neither should have happened in the first place. Okay, I'm gonna take a nap now. Bye.